Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Shane Beamer, the South Carolina Gamecocks, heading on the road to play a Vanderbilt team. That's legit. I think there were a lot of people who questioned how good Vanderbilt could be in 2024. Even when they were starting to win some games early on in the season, you look up in the middle of November, or I should say early November. This Vanderbilt team's a top 25 team in the country, 3-2 in conference play, 6-3 overall, going up against the South Carolina team that, my biggest takeaway from that South Carolina win against Texas A&M was South Carolina's figuring out what they are as a football team. And I think that matters. I think Lenore Sellers is getting better as a quarterback. He is, pretty clearly maturing and kind of blossoming, you might say, as a quarterback before our eyes. In that South Carolina defense, it's about as legit as they come. And we kind of knew this South Carolina defense was special early in the season. I think the question was, could the offense figure it out? If this offense can put it together down the stretch in the month of November, this team is an extremely dangerous football team. Fired up to get into this one now. Before we do, and as always, I think most importantly, let it fly in the comment section to the South Carolina fans that are traveling to Nashville to watch this football game. Let it fly in the comment section. I spent some time down in Nashville. I can give you some phenomenal restaurant recommendations. And if you want to talk about the score and prediction of this football game, let it fly down there as well. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get into this one. I want to start with this Vanderbilt offense going up against the South Carolina defense that I'm just going to read off some stats to really allow us to appreciate how good this South Carolina team is on defense. 18.9 points per game allowed, top 15 in the country, only 4.3 yards per play. That is number 4 in the country. They only allow 2.9 yards per carry. That's number 9 in the country. They sacked the quarterback 11.2% of dropbacks. That's number 4 in the country. And they forced 2.3 turnovers per game. That's top 5 in the country. And they are top 10 in the country. And in multiple metrics that you're for in elite defenses. And I think this South Carolina defense kind of goes through this defensive line, headlined by two of the better edge rushers that we see in the conference in Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart. I say this all the time. I haven't seen a true freshman come into the SEC along the line of scrimmage and dominate the way Dylan Stewart dominates in a very long time. I think they have a very good interior defensive line that showed up multiple occasions against Texas A&M. You look at this matchup, and I think the first thing you're looking at is, look, Vanderbilt, they want to run the football and kind of control the time of possession. They're a top 20 team in the country in time of possession. Vanderbilt's going to try to shorten games, right? They're going to try to limit the amount of times each team gets the football, stay on the football field on offense. Thought they did a really good job against Alabama doing that. I think they kind of knew they would struggle to stop Alabama's offense. They didn't want to get into a shootout kind of game against Alabama. So what did they do? Just stayed on the football field on offense, limited the amount of times Alabama could get the football. Alabama made some mistakes Vanderbilt capitalized on, and it was enough for Vanderbilt to get it done at home. That's kind of the recipe for this Vanderbilt team, and they evidently do it very, very well. Now, the biggest storyline here is Vanderbilt wants to run the football. They run the football 60% of the time. That's 15th in the country. They're not extremely efficient running it, but they run it in a lot of different ways. South Carolina is really good at stopping the run, but this is a hyper-aggressive South Carolina defense, right? They want to get upfield. They want to create negative plays. This is a Vanderbilt rushing attack that is going to give you a lot of misdirection. They're obviously going to get Diego Pavia involved with his legs. He's the leading rusher on this football team. Kind of this offense clearly goes through Diego Pavia. What I'm looking at is, can Vanderbilt kind of confuse the front seven of South Carolina? Because I look at this matchup and say, from a pure talent standpoint, from a pure dude standpoint, I think South Carolina can win the battle up front against this Vanderbilt offensive line. And so I think Vanderbilt, kind of like they did against Alabama, is going to have to do a fair amount of scheming up some plays to move the chains and stay on the field. Can this South Carolina defense, be aggressive, create those negative plays that they've been so good creating over the last couple of weeks, but also, kind of play some disciplined football, some good eye discipline, because you're going to see a lot of pre-snap motion. You're going to see a ton of different running concepts from this Vanderbilt team. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And I think, secondly, Vanderbilt does not throw the ball all that often, and they're certainly not that efficient when they throw the football when you look at completion percentage. That being said, you look at what they do really well is they marry that passing game with the run game extremely well, and they hit explosive plays through the air. You know what I mean? Like 8.2 yards per pass for Vanderbilt. That's 21st in the country. This is not an air raid offense by any means, but when they do try to throw the football, they're going to try to be explosive. They're going to go off of play action. Again, for South Carolina, it's that fine line between creating turnovers, creating negative plays, being that aggressive South Carolina defense that we kind of all are starting to love going into the month of November, but also not giving up the explosive play to this Vanderbilt offense. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Vanderbilt does a lot of the small things right. They're really good on third and fourth down. They're good in the red zone. They don't turn the football over. And so if you're South Carolina, you kind of want them, you want to put them in spots where they can't be good in those spots. You want to create some turnovers. You want to get off the field on third and fourth down. Some of those, kind of in the margin stats, that's kind of what you're looking for when you want to beat this Vanderbilt team. Now, you flip the sides. This Vanderbilt defense is kind of coming along the last couple of weeks. It really was not good to start the season. They limited Auburn to only 7 points in that football game, limited Texas to only 27 points, which is a pretty good number considering how much, firepower Texas has. Not very good in the secondary, but quite solid against the run. For South Carolina, you want a repeat performance of what you just saw against Texas A&M. That Texas A&M defense, at least in my opinion, is one of the better units in the SEC. South Carolina, I think my biggest takeaway from that South Carolina performance at home against Texas A&M was two things. One, Lenore Sellers is getting better as a quarterback. And this is something we talked about heading into 2024 where, we kind of knew there'd be some growing pains with a quarterback in Lenore Sellers, who's a redshirt freshman who was kind of a raw physical traits prospect out of high school. We knew there would be some growing pains. It wasn't going to come together for Lenore Sellers immediately in 2024. But what happens when it does come together? We kind of saw what happens for South Carolina's offense when it does come together against Texas A&M. I mean, you put up 44 points, over 500 yards of total offense. It starts with Lenore Sellers taking care of the football, being a playmaker when he needs to, but also kind of playing within the offense. I thought he towed that line against Texas A&M very well. I mean, there were plenty of times where Texas A&M had, some free rushers on Lenore Sellers. Lenore Sellers was able to not only avoid taking big time negative plays, but turn some of those negative plays into some explosive on offense by making people miss in the backfield and extending plays. You want to see Lenore Sellers continue to do that, but also at the same time, hey, when it's not there, we're not making those crucial turnovers, because that's how this Vanderbilt team is winning football games. Like, they're capitalizing on mistakes teams are making. So South Carolina, avoid those, big time negative plays. Lenore Sellers continue to play within the offense and run the football. I mean, 286 rushing yards against the Texas A&M front seven that I think is really good. That kind of explains it. Rocket Sanders looks like the Rocket Sanders we all remember back in 2022 at Arkansas. He was clearly banged up in 2023 and, quite frankly, clearly banged up to start the season for South Carolina at times. That was the Rocket Sanders that South Carolina wanted to get in the transfer portal. And if you get that kind of Rocket Sanders, like, this South Carolina rushing attack is really dangerous, very similar to Vanderbilt. They run the football 60% of the time as well. It's a run-first South Carolina offense that wants to hit explosive plays in the passing attack. You'll see some people get up and say Lenore Sellers completed less than 50% of his balls against Texas A&M. I don't really care what the completion percentage is when you're scoring 44 points and have over 500 yards of total offense. They were averaging almost 20 yards per completion. It doesn't necessarily go through the wide receivers. They run this passing attack kind of through the running backs and the tight ends like Simon. That being said, it works. Like, whatever South Carolina was doing against Texas A&M, that's the offense you want to see the rest of November, because that is when Lenore Sellers is clearly comfortable. You're running the football well. You're working some play action. You're hitting some explosive plays. That is what you, and you're not turning the football over, which I think is a massive storyline for South Carolina. Another note, the offensive line's getting better. Like, I wouldn't say they won the day against Texas A&M, but when you run the football for 286 yards and you don't give up a sack, I mean, Lenore Sellers did a good job avoiding some sacks. It was a problem for South Carolina early, and we kind of knew again it was going to be some growing pains. Just like you had a redshirt freshman that hasn't played a ton of football starting at quarterback, you also had a true freshman starting at left tackle in Josiah Thompson. I think this unit's getting better. And I think that's kind of the storyline for South Carolina, where when you go into the month of November, what you're kind of looking at is what are the teams that are getting better and what are the teams that are getting worse. I think South Carolina is clearly one of those teams that is going in the right direction in the month of November. And if they can translate that kind of momentum into this football game, you feel pretty good about it. Now, getting into the pick here, South Carolina 3-point favorites on the road playing at I would bet there's a lot of South Carolina fans that are making the trip to this football game. Vanderbilt's a really good team, and I want to be very clear. Like I got my graduate degree from Vanderbilt. I'm a Vanderbilt guy. I'm gonna go South Carolina to cover the 3 points here because you look at this South Carolina team and say that they're getting better. Lenore Sellers is playing the best football we've seen from him all of 2024, and this defense is elite. And it's hard for me to see Vanderbilt staying on the foot. They do a really good job avoiding negative plays, Vanderbilt does. I don't know if they can avoid those negative plays against South Carolina. If you can get Vanderbilt in some of those third and long situations where it is clearly we got to drop back and throw the football, it's very hard for Vanderbilt to stay on the field. I think South Carolina is going to get those negative plays. I think they're going to be able to score enough points and lean on this defense, which has kind of become the identity of this team. Like, we want to run the football, play good defense. That's a recipe for South Carolina to win a lot of football games. Give me South Carolina to cover the 3 points on the road, knock off a top 25 team. Quite frankly, South Carolina should be ranked right now. I think both of these teams should be ranked. Give me South Carolina covering the 3 points. Again, South Carolina fans, y'all let the score predictions fly in the comment section, but more importantly, let it fly in the comment section if you are heading out to Nashville, Tennessee. I will give some dynamite restaurant recommendations. Hopefully they pan out. That'd be a bad look if I sent you to some bad places. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.